One of the biggest problems that people seem to have when it comes to designing creatures or monsters is that there is this part of you that wants to design something really cool, but chances are you haven't taken the time to just simply write it down. So you can look right here and see that I have three different categories. When you're designing a creature or a monster, whether it's for a game or whether it's for your own personal project, it's going to be broken down into about three categories. And of course, within these, there's going to be subcategories. But if you're doing something, it's either going to be horror. Obviously, monsters and creatures are going to go there, or it's going to be sci-fi. Obviously, it's going to get talking about aliens, or it's going to be fantasy. And so if you're looking at horror, is it going to be a monster that's more of an H.P. Lovecraft style monster where it's interdimensional and it doesn't quite fit into a certain category? Is it a boogeyman? A boogeyman is something like the gentleman from Hush or the Babadook or something like that. Is it a killer like a Jason Voorhees or some sort of version of the big hulking serial killer? I put vampire down there because vampires can run the gambit from a Nosferatu style vampire, or a more human looking vampire, or a much more of a vampire bat like creature. Is it a zombie or a version of a zombie? If you've played zombie games or games with the undead in them, you know that they can come in all shapes and sizes. An undead or zombie can be a very broad category. Is it a doll? Maybe someone has commissioned you to do the art for a horror comic and they want a killer doll or someone with a doll mask. That's also a monster. Or is it some sort of virus, sort of like The Last of Us? Or is it some sort of symbiote or parasite? Would probably be a better word. If it's sci-fi, then we're looking at the Xenomorph. Xenomorph is from the movie Alien. And there's almost no way to talk about aliens without talking about that particular creature design, because it's been so influential that there's just kind of no way around it. It's one of the big elephants in the room. Is it sci-fi wildlife? There was a movie a while back called Outlander, and the thing that they were trying to capture came from another world, but it was essentially a wild animal. Is it interdimensional? Is it going back to an H.P. Lovecraft style of sci-fi where it's modern day, but they're dealing with something that isn't from here? A really good example of that is Stephen King's It. Even though it manifests itself as Pennywise, it's still an interdimensional being. And of course, there's fantasy. So fantasy that gets into, obviously, there's dragons, different monsters and beasts that you can fight. And beast men, that's a pretty diverse category. So that could be a werewolf or some sort of sentient tiger-like being, or we've all seen the fantasy games or fantasy movies where there is some sort of beast talking humanoid figure. Is it something a bit more mythical? Is it going to be more like a Medusa or a griffin or some other sort of classic mythological beast? Once you can kind of narrow it down to which category it's going to fall in, it makes your job a lot easier. So my first unofficial assignment to you is just get yourself a notebook. Just nothing fancy, just a regular little notebook, or at least grab some paper and start taking notes and start writing things down. Write down your ideas. Think about what category you're going to be designing some of these monsters in. We're going to touch on all of them, but which one is your favorite category? And as a matter of fact, if you guys want to comment in the comment section, what's your favorite category or the kind of monster? And also, once you start thinking about that, designing, this is about design. And so you also want to think about, is it for a game? Is the game 2D? Are you going to be handing it off to a 3D modeler? That changes some things. Is it a comic book or manga? Is it animation? If so, Having a dragon with drawing 1,000 scales is great for an illustration, but it's not realistic to animate that. It's not realistic, at least not in 2D animation. If it's a comic, you got to be aware of some of the textures that you're using, and it's going to be something that you're going to have to draw over and over again. So I just want to give you an overview. Start to write some things down, and this resource, of course, is going to help you out here, and it's going to be there for you if you just want to look. There's no way that I could put every single kind of monster on here because it's just kind of limitless, and this is kind of what this course is about, is to get your imagination going and have you start actually designing some creatures and design with some confidence. So I will see you in the next video.